Have you ever wondered why so many portrait photographers love using the 85mm lens? Have you tried using it and the results are just kind of ordinary? The truth is that the 85mm can change your portraits forever and give you a lens that will deliver amazing results if you learn to use it the right way. My 28-year-old 85mm lens is still my go-to lens for shooting client portraits. In this video, I'm going to reveal my biggest game-changing tips, show you how they can quickly elevate your photography game no matter what your current skill level is, and I'll show you some practical examples of how you can effortlessly apply these techniques for stunning professional results. And if you stick around to the end, I'm going to give you a little bonus about shooting portraits in bright lights. But first, let me show you how I first started using my 85mm lens for portraits. Here's how I started using the 85mm. It's close, blurry background, wide aperture. It's a nice enough shot, and to be honest, it's a shot that I make sure to mix in during a photo shoot anyway because it's a safe and clean shot. But it's also a shot that literally anyone can pick up a camera with a lens like this and take. It's boring. Now, check out this image, and this one, and this one. I'm going to show you why each of these photos got way more attention from my clients that absolutely loved them. When I first started using this 85mm lens for portraits, I would set it to f1.4, frame my subject, and just shoot. I mean, that's what this lens is for, right? That's why you get a lens like this. Well, sort of. You see, whether your lens is a f1.4, 1.8, or even a 2.8 or more, it's not always about getting the blurriest background possible. It's about creating an image that has interest and is compelling. This means putting some thought into the elements in your image, like the background, for example, and how they can either make the photo better or worse. Let me show you some practical examples of what I mean. In this holiday photo shoot, all I did was position the baby so that some of the lights were behind him. That changed an otherwise boring, dull image with a blurred background into something more interesting and one that fit the look and feel of the image. Using bright highlights like this is one of my favorite ways to add some more interest to an image. It doesn't have to be Christmas lights, although that works great. Any bright specular highlights like that in the image when you're using a wide aperture and a lens like this is going to look great. It takes a dull background and gives it some interest. Just be sure that it doesn't take too much away from the subject. Here's another image where the background positioning was extremely important. Even though I shot this at f1.8, the boardwalk and the lights behind them creates leading lines that bring your attention back to the family. I actually think I could have done better with this because I don't like where the lights intersect with them. It's a little distracting as it kind of goes through their heads, which kind of goes to show you how it's easy to miss little things like this that can make your image a lot more compelling. Now let's take a look at something completely different. In this image, the subject had on a white shirt, which made it a perfect contrast from this very colorful wall. Instead of having her step away from the mural and make the mural all blurry, I had her closer to it and only slightly blurred the mural, just to make sure she was the focus of the image and the mural was part of the supporting cast. But I didn't blur out the background completely, and I think the image is better for it. But you should know that sometimes a wide open aperture and a blurry background still works great. So don't give up on this setup just because I'm telling you it's a little boring. It is, but it still works. Just make sure you look for ways to use the background to enhance the shot as well. And if you love the wide open shot, make sure you stick around because that bonus tip at the end is all about shooting wide aperture in any light. But the background isn't the only place where you can add elements to your image to make it more compelling. Another thing you can do with an 85mm lens is adding foreground elements. Take this picture, for example. I could have just shot her on the steps and it would have made a perfectly cute photo of a little kid during a family portrait shoot. But by kind of going behind these bushes and shooting through the bushes, it gives it a whole new feel. It adds depth to the image, and adding depth to your image really gives it that 3D effect. Putting something in the foreground turns it from a two-dimensional image into a three-dimensional visual for the viewer. Here's another image where it wasn't such a obvious foreground element, but the fact that the ivy was closer to the camera than the subject gives it some depth as well. Plus, you can see the background has some interest too, so it kind of gives you all three. When you can create an image with a foreground, a background, and the subject in the middle, now you have a really compelling image that looks three-dimensional and has some serious depth to it. And those are the images that are going to get attention. But using the background and foreground elements effectively in your image is only one part of creating better photos with your 85mm. Let's go back to that first photo I showed you. In addition to having nothing of interest in the image other than the subject, it's also taken at eye level and it's straight on. It's kind of boring to take it from that angle all the time. Now, I'm not saying don't take images like this, but you want to vary it a little bit. Don't be afraid to get close to your subject when using an 85mm lens. This will help you capture more detail and create a more intimate portrait. This is an especially useful technique when you want to capture some detail of the portrait. Perhaps it's a couple during an engagement shoot and they're embracing and you want to get close and capture that. Or you just have someone with beautiful eyes and you want to get a shot that really focuses in on their eyes. It's also easy with the 85mm to shoot at eye level. You just stand there and take the shot. But I want you to vary that. You can shoot from a low angle to create a sense of power or authority. Or you can change it up and get on a high angle and shoot down on someone for a more vulnerable look if that's what you're going for. Don't be afraid to give someone extra space. I know the 85mm is commonly used for more of a close-up portrait, shoulders and up, but when you back up and shoot a full body shot, you're going to capture some really nice portraits that show a little bit of the environment the person's in. This is especially good for outdoor portraits. This is less of a posed portrait, but it really demonstrates what I'm talking about really well here. I was shooting some promo shots for this local band, and for this shot, instead of getting right up front, I took a few steps back, gave them some space, and made sure I used the crowd as a foreground element. Not only does it make for a more interesting and energetic shot, it tells the full story of what was happening and is also a perfect promotion shot for the band because it shows them with a crowd, and that gives the band a little more credibility that they can actually draw a crowd. So how do you do this? Well, this is the easy one. It really doesn't take any special skill. It just requires a little bit of activity. When you're shooting a portrait, move around. Try different angles. Go to different sides of them. Try higher, try lower. Look for different ways to approach the portrait. Experiment, and you may get some good results, you may get some bad results, but I guarantee overall you're going to get much better results than if you just stayed in the same place. But there's one key to every good portrait, and it can really take your shots to the next level. Once you get into that range of 85mm, most photographers would call this a short telephoto. So you're not getting those big wide angle shots. And that means for the most part, even if you do the things that I just talked about, you're going to be taking portraits that are usually filling the frame with the subject. So they're the star of the show. And they have to look good. And there's really two ways to accomplish that. The first is with good posing. And if you want to see a whole video just about posing, let me know in the comments below because it is a big topic. But the second one is even more important, and that's using light effectively. That means lighting your subject in a flattering way or using light in a more creative way. Check out this image I shot at a winery. I could have done this same shot with a flash somewhere else in the winery, but I wanted to use the window lighting because the blinds gave this cool effect. Now, this wasn't the only shot I shot here, but it was something I was experimenting with, and it came out really well, and it was one of the favorites from that shoot. So when you get to a location and you're getting ready to shoot your portrait, look to see where the light is coming from. If you're just starting out and you're not so versed in reading light, just use your hand. Hold up your hand to the light and turn it around and see where the hand gets brighter and see where it gets darker. That's kind of mimicking the person's face, so you know that how you can position them to get certain looks and certain lighting. And as you shoot them, pay attention to the light on their face. Make sure you're not creating any weird shadows or anything like that. Try to start with flat lighting and then experiment with some different types of lighting. This becomes especially important if you're shooting closer up. When you're close up to someone, the portrait becomes a lot about their eyes. So in addition to making sure the eyes are in focus, we also want to make sure they have some light hitting them. This tends to be a problem when you're shooting natural light and you go into the shade area to avoid the harsh sunlight. If there's no light actually hitting the eyes, they look kind of dull and lifeless. But there are 3 easy ways to bring those eyes back to life. The easy way is to simply use a flash. I like to use flash even when I'm shooting in good natural light, just so I can guarantee to get some nice catch lights in the eyes. It really adds some life to the image. The second thing you can do is to use a reflector. Now, that can be tricky and it doesn't always work great, especially if you're shooting multiple people at once. So you have to experiment with that and practice with that. The last one is for when you're shooting only natural light and that's all that you have, and especially in that situation where you're kind of going into the open shade to keep the harsh sunlight off their face. What you need to do here is get close to where the bright light is. You may not want to put their face completely in the bright light, but you want to kind of get on the edge of the shade. That way you're really close to the bright light and it'll add some more light into their eyes and give it that life that is missing if you're deep into the shade. And speaking of natural light, I promised to give you a tip about shooting portraits in bright light. Have you ever tried to go out on a sunny day outside and you want to use a wide aperture, but you can't get a shutter speed high enough to keep the aperture wide open? Now, you could just close down the aperture, but you lose the best part of shooting with a lens like this. There's another option. You can use one of these. It's an ND filter, and you put it on the end of your lens, in front of the lens, and it will cut down on the amount of light getting into your lens without changing the color of the image. So you can shoot wide open with a shutter speed your camera is capable of. But these techniques alone are not going to guarantee that you'll create amazing photos consistently, which is why you need to watch this video next if you want to know the ingredients to creating professional looking images every time.